The best people actually aren't supposed to be managed, right? They're just meant to be guided, led, taught. I will say I love what I do, but I actually love what I do if I can then teach it to somebody else. Like that's what I love most. That's my passion. And I don't want to do it secretively. I want them to know, hey, I'm aware of this. I have access to this. I look at this. And they need to know that. My advice now to anyone who wants to become a doctor is get a bachelor's in nursing, because as part of the education of nursing versus like a biochemistry or even pre-med, you're actually in the hospital, right, as a nursing student. Biochemistry, molecular biology, there's no exposure to the actual profession until you're in med school, and then there's no turning back. And nursing school made it very clear to me that I didn't want to be a doctor.
One of the things I say to people is one of the best ways to buy a resale in a franchise, 15 locations across 3 different franchise brands. That's the size of Nicholas Marco's franchise portfolio. He currently owns and operates 11 Hand and Stone franchises, along with 2 locations of 2 other franchise brands. So this is your opportunity to get inside of the mind of someone who's built a true franchise empire with just part of his portfolio of locations doing over $25 million in sales. Now, in this episode, we talked about the strategies that he used to grow his locations. He used a very specific strategy to scale so quickly, along with how he structures his organization and his business with varying levels of management to maximize not just efficiency, but success within his locations. And then what he spends his time doing as an owner. Now, Nicholas is also the regional developer of Ohio for Hand and Stone, and he's also the host of his new podcast called The Opportunity Coach, and recently founded a financial advisory firm as well. So if you want to know how to build an incredible business portfolio and how he manages all of it, well, you're in for a treat. Now, if you want to buy a franchise in the next 12 months, you should check out my free franchise masterclass at franchiseempire.com/masterclass. And if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise or resale business, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory, and you can schedule a free call to see what's available in your area. The link is also in the description below. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, and building your empire doesn't happen overnight. My name is Tarek Johnson, and owning franchises is what helped me go from employee to employer and start building my empire for my family. So this podcast is for you, the empire builders. For those of you who want to build something that stands the test of time. This is for those of you who are crazy enough to believe that you can make the dream in your head come to life. This podcast is all about bringing you real people who are building real empires so you can get inside their mind and heart and get proven strategies and actionable insights that will catapult you to build, grow, and scale your empire. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Franchise Empire Show. I have Nicholas Marco here. Thanks for joining, man.
You got it. Thank you so much. I'm honestly honored to be a part of your show. I'm a big fan of your content, and I think the information you put out there is very helpful. I know I've already connected a friend of mine with you, because even without really doing a deeper dive, you just make me pretty reassured that you have the knowledge that people are yearning for in their just discovery and research of just franchising in general. So I think you're doing a really good thing, and it's very, very helpful and necessary, especially with my experience being in the franchisor side of things and the franchisee side of things. I know, what it's like to put myself in both shoes, and this information is huge. So
Thanks, man. That means a lot coming from you and what you've accomplished. So yeah, thanks. Really appreciate it. So
you got it.
for folks that so you and I haven't really connected much. We've emailed a few times back and forth, but we haven't really had any sort of meaningful conversation. So what's cool is that some of my natural questions that we might have behind the scenes, we'll get to kind of unpack live, which I think for me is actually the type of content that I enjoy consuming personally. But so what you're multi-brand, right? Or you've been a serial entrepreneur. What do you do? What's your current kind of portfolio look like as of today?
Yeah, I'm 34 years old, which I feel like kind of can give some cool context of where I'm at now and how, when you really are fortunate to be exposed to business at a young age and you take full advantage of that, how far you can go. I find myself often in rooms with people 10 plus years older than me when it comes to, say, the number of locations I own or the number of brands that I'm involved with or just the number of businesses I'm involved with. And so that is very much due to my father, John Marco, being the founder of Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa, which is a national and international franchise that's very much the, I think, the leader in its category for massages, facials, and we do waxing as well, hair removal. So that first location opened, as I was like going into high school 20 years ago, as of this November in my hometown. And I'm fortunate to be the owner of the original franchise location, which again opened in my hometown. And so yeah, and I was your kind of typical in the sense of I'm going to be a doctor. So, I was very just, I did well in school, went to Penn State for biochemistry and molecular biology as my bachelor's degree, had a minor in chemistry. I tutored chemistry throughout college. I was, in front of 300 plus students, which kind of gave into my leadership that I loved to have. And I loved educating people and making information feel more digestible and really kind of make sure that people understood what I was talking about. So I loved teaching. And I was very torn, very like the idea of breaking away from this path that I've always had to become a doctor was really very just like freeing once I finally stopped on that path. Um, and so my father is very practical in his advice. And so he's kind of looking at the work life balance. And, he was a physical therapist for 20 years. So he worked as a physical therapist for 20 years and had a passion for massage inherently through his practice, rehabilitating people. And then he kept his eyes on the massage industry and saw this amazing opportunity because massage has such wonderful benefits. But back in 2004, so few people would get a massage unless it was a vacation or some kind of just luxurious treat versus as part of their lifestyle. Now I think we can all say, even, in millennials and even younger, you're getting a massage much earlier in life. And now when you get one, you're hooked and it becomes a part of your lifestyle, becomes part of your therapy for yourself and your self-care. And so, but he gave me this advice of like, maybe you should look into this nurse anesthetist career because as I was shadowing surgeries, I kept seeing that there was, somebody at the head of the bed, that never left. And then there was the anesthesiologist that kept coming in and out of the OR. And the nurse anesthetist route kind of intrigued me in the sense of like it's this higher level nursing profession. They do well financially. They learn things that really sparked my interest. And so bottom line is I graduated Penn State, didn't take the MCATs because I was disciplined enough to say, if it's 8 to 12 years of a road to become a doctor and I'm already doubting it now, why would I apply to med school and kind of keep myself trapped in this path? Let me just kind of put pause on that and just experience some other things. And so it's actually funny. My advice now to anyone who wants to become a doctor is get a bachelor's in nursing because as part of the education of nursing versus like a biochemistry or even pre-med, you're actually in the hospital, right, as a nursing student. Biochemistry, molecular biology, there's no exposure to the actual profession until you're in med school, and then there's no turning back. And nursing school made it very clear to me that I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to go to med school. And and then, as I was in nursing school, had the opportunity to be a franchisee of Hand and Stone. I grew up in the business. I loved being utilized to support owners. I'm meeting these people with corporate backgrounds, and I'm a kid essentially. And they're asking me all these questions because I worked in the business, and the corporate office is using me to do trainings, and I'm having phone calls with franchise owners that came into this brand that my dad started, and I loved being that resource, that gave into my passion for teaching. And I will say I love what I do, but I actually love what I do if I can then teach it to somebody else. Like, that's what I love most. That's my passion. um, so once I became an actual franchisee, opened a location from scratch, it just snowballed. And I actually maintained my nursing career, worked in the ICU for 6 years as a registered nurse. I literally started my job as a RN the same week that that first location that I opened from day one opened. So that's where all the gray hairs started. And I just then got the confidence to approach owners who I heard through the grapevine were considering selling. And all of the locations that I own within Hand and Stone are acquisitions, and I just purchased them. And now I'm a 11 location owner of Hand and Stone, and now have branched out into other brands in the same kind of wellness fitness industry. And I've also been the regional developer for the state of Ohio, because when my father was about to retire and had sold the business to private equity, Ohio was one big state on the map that really Hand and Stone didn't have much of a presence at all. There was only one location at the time. And then since I became a regional developer back in 2015, there's now 21 locations, and many other licenses, sold, just not open yet.
So our team have looked into a few hundred franchises and put together a list of 5 low-cost franchises that all make $1 million or more and that have a proven track record of both happy and profitable franchisees. So if you have a net worth of at least $150,000 and you want to see if the territory that you want is still available for any of these franchises, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, interesting. And so for people that may not be familiar with the regional developer model, how does that work? How is that structured?
Yeah, my father was big on the regional development kind of architecture, if you will, of growing a brand, where he sold, most of New Jersey, a good chunk of Florida, I think all of Arizona, or at least a big chunk of Arizona, to, basically franchisees who were early adopters to the brand, and their job was to sell and be that main point of contact to prospects in that market, and then support them through their business ownership. And it's interesting when you talk to people on the franchisor side about their perspective on, having an area developer or regional developer versus not. But as a new franchise brand, it's also a great way to collect capital, because they're paying, a sizable amount, much more than just a franchise fee, when they're buying the rights to sell, those licenses in that state. And I will say, especially in certain markets, he picked really great salespeople that, knew that their mission was to sell locations, licenses, and then get them open. And so we don't, it's not really something that Hand and Stone is no longer, in that business. But I think it is a little bit more common when you're a newer brand to offer these area developer agreements.
Yeah, what's interesting is a lot of brands just don't do it anymore. They're just very aggressive with their franchise development. But I definitely think, well, obviously it worked. Number one, approximately how many locations does Hand and Stone have?
Yeah, we are about 600 when you include our locations in Canada.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, obviously the strategy worked. How is the franchise developer model different from, master, uh, franchising, or is it essentially the same thing?
Yeah, I would say it's essentially the same thing. He had done a master license for Canada or most provinces of Canada, but now the corporate office has now taken those rights back because that a master licensee had sold those rights back. So I think master license maybe just looked at as having a bigger scale in terms of maybe it is like a country internationally or but I don't think that there's a big difference. Honestly, it might just be in, frankly, even from area developer to area developer, it's all just in the agreement, right? And what that document outlines as far as what your role is, and how you're compensated.
Yeah, interesting. Alright, so I wanna understand how because you have 11 locations, and then you're a franchisee in another brand, right, with 2?
Yeah, so I can and may still expand Hand and Stone in terms of my existing portfolio, maybe in other states, maybe just in Jersey. But I thought, how cool would it be to almost like this challenge to get into another franchise brand? I grew up in one. My blood, and passion is Hand and Stone, but a dry bar franchise has pretty much the same customer as a Hand and Stone client. Sweat 440, which is a up and coming fitness concept, similar to like an F45. I discovered that in Miami. Also, really similar type of a client. So I thought where I'm very successful, like in Toms River, New Jersey, where the original Hand and Stone is located, I actually have Dry Bar next door, and then just few stores down in the same shopping center, a Sweat 440. So it really is cool to be able to own three businesses in the same shopping center in the same town. It's a little bit nicer as far as then, I'm a big culture person and I'm all about the presence of your team. My team then doesn't have to go further out. I'm still in my core counties of central New Jersey.
Yeah, I guess next up is to just buy that shopping center, huh?
Oh my God, I know. Marco Plaza, as people like to call it. Yeah, I think I might have missed the boat on it, which is unfortunate. But they did really clean it up too, which we call the Hand and Stone sign in that shopping center like a billboard. It is truly huge. I pushed so hard to make it big, and it's I think why that's the number one location in the whole brand, really, in sales. Plus, gift cards. We do a tremendous gift card business, always have, but I really do think that that sign actually kind of like pushed us to the next level, which has been really cool to see.
Yeah, interesting. So I wanna unpack 2 things. So number 1 is, just some of the deeper infrastructure of how you operate 11 units and, like, what your team looks like and management structure and overall, but I think the acquisition part of the conversation is interesting too, because when folks go, we talk a lot about resales on the channel, on the podcast and stuff, and there's really no one out there in like the kind of the brokerage world doing that. No one really talks about resales because they're complicated. So, but one of the things I say to people is one of the best ways to buy a resale in a franchise is to join the franchise as a new franchisee first. 'Cause then you're in and you get access to the deal flow. We lost out on my wife and I lost out on an opportunity about 8 months 6 or 8 months ago when we were looking at a really nice looking resale and a well-known home services franchise, and, kind of at the last minute, out of nowhere, the lady said, "Oh, we already reached a deal with the franchisee next to us." I was like, "Oh, man."
Okay, because that was going to be your entry into the system.
Yeah, that was gonna be the entry. So anyway, so I guess let's unpack that first in terms of, acquisitions. How do you when you were so you had your first one, and then you said you grew through acquisitions, and at the time, you were still working full time too, right?
Well, I actually took a part-time job as a nurse in the ICU and then had to quickly go to per diem because it was like really difficult in terms of, I'm in my early 20s, and I've worked in the original location since I was even, 10 plus years beyond the start of that business. And I've supported owners and been part of trainings and things like that. But very just humbling going through the day one exercise of a brand new location, which we did very well. But I had not been that independent, until then, and I really did learn a lot through trial and error. And I was, doing the business with my sister, and we're still partners to this day. But then she quickly went on bed rest because she was pregnant with twins, and I was really solo. Like at one point, it was like people were trying to call me. I'm in the ICU, and it's like, okay, this is messy. This is stressful.
And how old were you at this time too?
It was 10 years ago as of this fall. So I would have been 24, right after I graduated college. And as I'm finishing a bachelor's degree in nursing, which was an 11-month program. I literally graduated like May 4th, and then I enrolled in nursing school May 11th and just, kept it moving. Um, but what was your original question about?
Hey, so if you want to figure out if you should buy a franchise and learn the fastest and easiest way to figuring out the best franchise to buy and everything you need to know about the process, then you'll want to go get access to our Franchise Buyers Academy. In our Franchise Buyers Academy, you'll get a behind the scenes look into specific franchises and exactly how much money they are making. You'll get simple formulas for finding money making franchises and a blueprint on how to scale them into a franchise empire that can be sold for a lot of money later on. You'll be able to finally answer the question on, should I buy a franchise? Now you can get access at franchiseempire.com/FBA. Now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, yeah. So is that so you had this job and then you start scaling because you're talking about the first one. So the first one you took over, right?
Yeah, right. It's just the time management of it, right? Like how to deal with, I did like, think about how hard that really was. I was so embarrassed to ask my manager, who I actually worked in the ICU as like a nurse's aide, essentially. They call them patient care technicians, and I was excited to get that because I was in the ICU and I thought, like, okay, this is my way to get a nursing job right out of school. You don't always go right to the ICU once you get, your degree. You usually kind of work your way into the ICU. And so, they were excited and knew that that was my path. And then all of a sudden, I got to go to my manager and say, "Listen, this new business I opened, as they were fully aware of, I either have to, kind of resign, or could I stay on per diem, which is a very popular, nursing schedule. You just work kind of 2 times a month." Um, and I would work a little bit more in the early stages because I didn't want to not embrace the schedule. But I went from part time, which was 2 12-hour shifts a week, to then per diem at some point, and they gave me the per diem opportunity, which was great. And so that's how I then was able to manage, trying to not kind of keep the momentum going with the success of being an entrepreneur. And then the location closest to the one that we opened in Howell, New Jersey, was I had heard that she was considering selling.
So at this point, how many you had the one at this point?
Yeah, my sister and I opened the one in Howell, New Jersey from scratch, but then we also always had the original location in the family, if you will. It was technically a corporate location, Tom's River, but my father was still, a part of the management team. I think he may have been COO at the time. He had brought in a CEO, Todd Left, who's really just got an amazing pedigree in terms of just franchising experience. Um, so, it basically was two locations, now going on to number three was my first like acquisition on my own.
Wow, interesting. So going into that acquisition, like how did you approach it? What was your due diligence like? I mean, were you experienced in kind of being able to just value it? Then what was that like coming into, they've got this new owner now. Tell us about a little bit because like resales can be tricky. They can, stepping into it's like stepping onto a moving train, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a sponge. I will always be a sponge. And so, through the guidance of my father, and then whatever historical kind of acquisitions that was there at the time, which there wasn't a ton, that helped kind of guide the deal. I will say Lucy, who owned that location, is also a family friend. She's very much just like a straight shooter, so she made it pretty easy. I'll walk away and sell it to you for X, um, and we were comfortable with that number. And that's with a lot less knowledge of like what I would know now. Like now, I could drill down very specifically, like how long it would take me to pay that back, and kind of project out the potential of that location. I knew that the location had a lot of potential. It was doing around like 1.2, 1.3 million in sales. Now it's comfortably doing close to 2.5, and it only has 8 rooms. So it's one of the smallest locations actually in our entire brand. And so we really did maximize its capacity, which for us is treatment rooms. And we also share a lot of clients with my location that I already owned, which is important when you're looking at the inter spa transfer, if you will, right? When you're getting somebody from a membership of another location, that there's a split between the two spas. And so it's always better if you obviously own them both, because you're just paying yourself.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. So when number one, when you acquire it, and as you're acquiring these locations, how does that work in terms of financing? Are you using traditional SBA loans, or how are you approaching that aspect of it?
Yeah, I was fortunate where my dad's always supported me financially. And then now I've just gotten to the point where I've been able to for predominantly utilize the cash flow of my existing portfolio to fund the majority of the acquisitions, as well, which is kind of the idea of like, you know, how I've been able to grow. But I'm not growing so fast where outside lending would be necessary. And that's kind of the balance that I teeter on as far as if I want to kind of take it to the next level or not. I love having full ownership of my portfolio. And my hand and stone portfolio will do around 25 million in sales this year, just those 11 spas. So it's where I'm comfortable with the way that I've grown versus growing maybe with outside investors, if you will.
Yeah, makes sense. What's been the biggest, challenge that you've had to deal with in the either during the acquisition process as you're doing the deal, or right after, right? Where like whenever you buy resale, there's something there's something in the walls, or that you find after, and you're like, crap, I wish I would have known about that before. So what's the most challenging experience that you've gone through on that side?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been fortunate to not have any major gotchas, or really, frankly, any gotchas. I've also had, interestingly enough, really great, almost like personal relationships, almost like family type relationships with majority of the people I've acquired. When you think about my father being the founder, and most of the franchisees that sold to me were actually some of the originals. My best friend from childhood's parents were the owner of 2 locations. And then, really, a very good childhood family friend that was the original investors of Hand and Stone when my dad was just looking for money to get this thing off the ground. They were the franchisees of the other locations. And then, the location I was just mentioning earlier, she was kind of a family friend too. So, I had a really fortunate, like, relationship where I was very in the know of how that spa was ran. And it was actually one of those conversations where they're like, we don't want to take it to the next level. We know you can, and we're so happy you're going to be the new owner. And so, I really do love this playbook that I have on running this business. And that's like we come in kind of like the SWAT team, and we just kind of implement, but at a pace that I think is trying to be comfortable, so it's not too much change at once of these acquisitions. And in general, you stumble upon employees that were maybe part of that lack of structure ownership group for a reason. They actually preferred that. And so just overcoming the resistance to change is not easy. You're kind of the bad guy to some people no matter what. But I love that challenge, because my whole management style is getting to know people on an individual level and just seeing what motivates them and what's important to them, and how we could maybe find some way to deliver on that, or at least make sure that that's acknowledged. And so all in all, I'm a big like solutions person. I'm not really ever intimidated by a problem that I feel like we can't solve. There may be some problems that now I'm realizing the value of time, may not be worth the effort as far as where I'm sitting now, but there is a path to a solution. And we've been able to identify those solutions for any problems that did stand out in those acquisitions. But really nothing beyond just the resistance to change and being the new owner, and kind of the typical resistance that you can get from those employees.
Yeah, and I wanna, unpack that playbook in a little bit, but what is your, like, management and team structure look like with 11 locations? Like, take us down, like, the organizational chart.
Yeah, so actually, my husband and I are really managing this whole operations together. I'm the CEO, and he's COO of our organization. And then I really just my secret sauce is my regional managers, right? So my managers are very well supported by regional managers, and that's my hand in stone org chart. And then I've Drybar has two shops where I've now been able to create a regional manager for those shops as well, for those managers. But every location has one or two managers. We've actually I think had a really successful realization that the three manager model is actually not more effective, and actually can be counter productive. And we are very high volume, very busy businesses, and so three managers could feel right because it's just more support. But I'm a big efficiency person. I use technology wherever I can because I want the value of the manager to be on their time, being present in the business, managing the business, not at the computer, dealing with things that are, maybe not worth of their time. Maybe somebody else I can delegate it to, that kind of a thing. So I will say that's probably what I enjoy most is I have my, per entity, locations, but then I have my management company where all of those, roll up into a regional management team. I have a call center, and then I have administrative people. I have a full-time staff accountant, so I have like a true in-house finance. I've done the bookkeeping thing, and I could talk to you about, how that experience actually then drove me to create my own business in terms of financial advising and bookkeeping for other business owners. Um, but everyone knows who they report to, and that's where the buck stops with me. But there's quite a few layers, whether it's a regional manager and then a manager, and then there might be like one or two leadership type positions in the actual business that isn't like an assistant manager, but it's somebody that reports to the manager, that kind of a thing. And it works. And I just did my whole kind of annual review of every single manager. I sat with them all, and I love just listening. Like the regional manager kind of just goes over how their performance was over the year, and then I just ask them kind of just very big picture questions, almost like trying to engage on how their employee experience has been as a manager. What are their challenges? Where do they feel like they're struggling? What do they like? What do they not like? And then I think to myself, okay, how can I make what we're doing better? How can I just keep fine tuning? And that's what I do every day.
Wow, very, very, very interesting. So what I'm hearing is that number one, you have essentially like a holding company structure, which at 11 locations, I guess you have to, and you're very people centric in terms of your style. And I have learned that from some of the bigger, more successful entrepreneurs that I've met and connected with is that they have a very genuine belief about putting other people first and about building genuine relationships and about protecting culture and making sure that that's the case. So, it's just interesting to hear that commonality, right? I think a clue for some people who maybe are stuck at one or two, or aren't even at one or two yet, and go, okay, how could I one day build, a 20-25 million dollar empire? Um, so how does that? So you were talking about at the unit level having a manager, having one or two managers. How do what does that look like? Are you looking for a balance in personalities? Are you looking for opposites? Is it the same exact duties and roles in each location, or does it then have to be flexible based upon like the players that you have in those locations?
I mean, so you definitely have your core competencies that you want in, like, I will call it like a Marco region manager. I have this vision of like a true like program that members of my team are going to not just go through when they're onboarded, but it's just going to be this constant development, educating them through like a curriculum of what concepts I want them to understand and really master. And so, the core kind of competencies are there, but the reality is these are human beings and they're all going to be strong at certain things while others are stronger at other things. And there is a way in a multi-unit organization to try to leverage that, and so we bring them together in a lot of ways, and that's really like an employee perk that I try to promote, is you're not on the island, because I own multiple locations and I want you to pick up the phone and talk to your peers from other locations and ask them about what they're doing, because they can see each other's numbers to hit those goals that you're struggling to hit. And I want all of my managers, frankly, to want to spread the knowledge and motivate their peers to do well, because I reward that. I want that. I have even other locations calling my managers, in the franchise, and they come to us and they visit, they shadow, and I love that my managers want to do that, and I frankly think there'd be a problem if they didn't, because that's the culture I want to create. And so I think that helps make up for where others are weak, because I could coach you on things and I love to, but there's nothing like having a coach who's credible because they're in it literally right now and they're doing it. It just, I think, lands better. And so I think, obviously I'm in a place where I can't be that person anymore. And it's very, freeing when you want to give that kind of teaching and responsibility to your team, and it works. So, I find so much of what we do is just kind of very organic, right? People are just kind of recognizing the problems without me having to identify it for them, and then they're just solving it. And so I'm noticing that's happening a lot more and more, by having such a transparency. They all have business plans and they can see, how one manager is crushing it on a certain metric. And frankly, that manager makes my job easier, because it's less excuses that that other manager who's not hitting their targets can't provide anymore, because we see right down the street what the other spot is doing. But we don't do that to make anyone feel bad. It should be motivating, right? And so those are the things that I talk out loud though with my team, because I want to make sure that that is how they feel, right? Because if they feel intimidated by that kind of culture, that's fine, but that's just not going to be a fit. And so I'm always identifying if we are on the same page and zooming out to make sure, like, hey, are we still comfortable here? Do you understand what's happening? Like, what the goals are? Or is this uncomfortable because it's new, or it's uncomfortable because it's just not how you want to operate and it's not a culture that's a fit for you? Either way, we're fine. I want you to feel comfortable, to be honest.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, for some, it could be having a transparent conversation like that could be challenging for some folks. Yeah, there's some cultures where it creates, drama or resentment, or because people aren't able to just have that communication. Like, hey, it seems like you're struggling. This may not be the right fit for you. Like, if so, that's cool, but like let's just have a conversation about that.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like to me what I'm curious on your perspective. Is owning 11 under the structure that you have now with all of the layers now and being able to have that kind of internal mechanism and accountability, right? Is it actually easier than when you just own 1 or 2?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. In a lot of ways, I mean, there's volume is still volume, but when you have two, I always tell the owners the blessing of two is now your team knows you can't be in two places at once, right? It's physically impossible. So it just helps those who maybe don't know how to get out of running, working in the business instead of on the business. And then once you have, I think more, it allows for you to, manage a team versus, being more in the day to day, which for me is what I would prefer. And I think it's just a matter of finding what you want to do. There are great franchisees who want to be working like the client interactions and the operations of that. I never want to get too far from it. I actually love talking to a client who has a complaint because I love like that to me keeps me like just in the know and make sure I don't get too far away from the business. I love getting feedback. I'm a big like the complaint is a gift kind of a guy. That's the way I operate. Um, but it I wouldn't be happy owning one, me personally, but that's because that's just not fitting what drives me. So, I think that that's the kind of conversation that I have. Like when I talk to franchisees who really aren't like spending enough time on their business, like I look them in the eyes and say, like it or not, you're the CEO of your own organization. Like that's you, right? Unless you appoint somebody else, and basically almost be like a board member, that's you. And so a lot of franchise locations that are just not successful is the ownership's not really owning their responsibility. It feels too passive. There's not enough accountability on what their role is. And, some people just don't want that kind of accountability on themselves. And there's challenges in the way that their business grows, or they just aren't going to be a multi-unit operator because it just wouldn't work. Once you get to too many people, if you're not in it full time, it's you're going to have things fall through the cracks. It's just going to be one big mess and you're going to regret it. And frankly, you probably could make more money owning one because there's a whole new finance management skill set that you need to make sure that, the added resources that you now feel like you need don't kill your cash flow, right?
Mm, yeah. It's interesting some of the points you're making because, you know, the unspoken thing that when people are looking at item 19s and doing due diligence and trying to figure out, if they can make money, their candidates and franchise buyers are often putting so much of the pressure on the franchise. Is this going to be able to make me successful? And since you're a learner too, you probably watch Hormozy, right? Do you watch Hormozy's videos?
I do. Yes. Yes.
And so he had a video recently where he was like, "It's nothing outside of you that's gonna make you successful. Like, you are going to be the one that makes you successful." He's like, "Every single program or course I bought, I've gotten an ROI on because I made sure that I got an ROI on it." And I think it's one of the interesting things about franchising is that it can't, and there are bad franchisors, right? But it can become so easy to just blame the franchise system and blame the brand instead of going, "Oh, I suck at details. Oh, I'm not being proactive in my business. Oh, I'm only working 15 or 20 hours a week, and actually what's needed right now is 40." So I think that's an interesting point, and, what I'm hearing from you is that, like, you're on it. Like, you're on the details. I was actually just texting last night with a buddy of mine who owns, 7 territories of a home service franchise. And I was just curious, they're in the middle of an acquisition too, actually, uh, within their system. And I was like, "Hey, man, I'm curious, what are you the most involved in the business right now?" And he's like, "Well, some kind of sales and marketing stuff, a little bit of operations." I'm like, "Can you like, what do you mean by that? Like, what specifically?" And he's like, "Oh, I spend a lot of time working with our ads agency on the structure and like what the strategy is going to be." I'm like, "Oh wow, you're doing that on that level of detail, yeah." And he's like, "And I run all of our sales meetings and watch our sales team's numbers every day."
Mhm. Right.
And I'm like, and they have a sales manager, they have a whole reporting structure, but he's figured out a way to be able to invest his time in the things that he really likes. But this guy could like he could chill right now. Like his business is at a point where he could relax, but he's on it. And that's why they become so successful.
Yeah, and I think I would be nervous to even probably be at that place, which I'm certainly not, but I would, I want to keep everybody way far away from me as far as the competition and whatnot. And, you know, when my best friend's parents sold to us, we lost our biggest competitors, which were just the other franchisees of the same brand in similar, close markets. And so it's humbling in the sense that we really are, especially in my central New Jersey market, like the leader. I mean, I'm never the guy that's going to ignore the competition. I focus on my business first and foremost more than anything, but I got to be aware of what's going on if something is, they're taking employees from me because they're more appealing or whatnot. And we're very fortunate, knock on wood, to not have too many other just players, even in just our whole industry. Hand and Stone right now is positioned the best it's ever really been in a lot of ways. Our average sales per unit in the whole brand in the US is just shy of 1.4 million. And if you look at the FDDs of the other competitors, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars higher. And so we just kind of almost, I'm just the kind of guy that's like, okay, let's not take this for granted. Let's just keep going. What else can we do to be innovative, to be disruptive? And I have a really amazing relationship with our newest CEO. His name is John Tezza, and he has a great background specifically with Jersey Mike's, which is a brand that was founded also in the same county of where Hand and Stone was founded, which is cool. And it's just nice. He's local to me, so we talk often, and his vision for how to take the brand to the next level, we very much align on. And so it feels good, because you just don't want the franchisor to get in your way, right? And when they start saying things or doing things that give you pause, that's when you got to listen to that feeling. But I don't have that feeling with Hand and Stone, and 20 years in being a part of it since it started, that's, I think, remarkable, because change is inevitable in that much time. And I think we just keep evolving in the right direction.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier your playbook when you do buy an existing location. You said you guys kind of come in like like a SWAT team. Before you tell us about the playbook, do you think you would have been able to grow to what you've grown to without growing through acquisition? Like if you had just built them all out from new on your own, do you think you'd be at the same place in the same amount of time?
No, because these very mature locations that I own are, by default have an advantage of how high their revenue is because they how long they've been around. Now, I will say our ways have gotten, like, we'll grow a business 30 plus percent, even 50 plus percent the first year we owned it, because of that playbook. But then there have been these kind of heavy hitters that I acquired as well, and that helps me be able to afford the kind of resources that I need and not take away from all of the things that I am responsible for, and kind of just have just I need these moments to be able to like zoom out and really make sure I'm hitting the reset button and we're on the same page, like we're moving forward. And if I'm in the weeds, it's not possible. Or I'm dropping, things are falling through the cracks because I'm dropping the ball on them, because I'm telling you I'm able to do something related to the operations that I can't deliver on because there's just not enough time in the day. So, acquisitions in New Jersey, especially, was really the only way, because being a brand that's founded here, besides Florida, it's the biggest, number of units is in New Jersey. We have almost 70 locations in New Jersey. So there was only so many markets available, and I love my market. Most of them are, really kind of adjacent to each other, and there's a lot of perks to that.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how does your playbook work or whatever you're willing to share on it? Like, so you're coming into buying a new, not new, but buying an existing location, and you have this model and framework of like, all right, we're going to run these plays. What does that look like? How has that been so effective at growing sales quickly?
There's a lot of, and yes, I'm younger, and I love the challenge of trying to make running this business work without technology, but it would obviously just be a lot less efficient. So I don't know that we could have hit these newer levels without using like a project management tool. I've been a big user of asana.com for years, and it's literally like a playbook for each individual member of the management team. Their responsibilities, whether they're as needed, daily, weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, quarterly, whatever it is, they're all in writing, literally with instructions, and they're checking off the task, so like I can actually see whether or not they did it. So transparency and accountability is cool in my company. I'm a big that's the culture I want. And so, when you're a manager just hired in my company, we give you your playbook. You can actually just on your own time read up on what your role is and then actually come to us with questions, which is a really great way to, I think, learn and onboard versus just teaching you every single thing, which is really just time consuming and not necessarily the best way to learn. So, I do want to be the owner who literally has a recurring task that says refill the water wall with distilled water once a week and check it off, because I do like to just know that there's no, uh, you know, um, just ambiguousness as far as like what their responsibilities are and who's doing what. So, if you're the manager, the reality is everything in that business is your responsibility. If you're a co-manager, then you get to share those responsibilities. And the regional manager's job is to make sure the manager gets all of those things done and then potentially take some of those responsibilities off the manager's plate because they might be pushing that boundary of, do I need a second manager? Do I not? The revenue's not there yet. So we leverage some external resource to help share the responsibilities, but it's all in Asana. It's all outlined. It's all very clear. And I like that it works. Um, but I also, want things to not be completely rigid where there's not this individuality in terms of like if one spa wants to do something this way and the other spa does something this way, as long as there's not a negative for the difference, I'm okay with it because, it gives people that independence. I just did this talk yesterday with my team. Like, I don't want to meddle into what's going on. I'm only going to come in and meddle when the numbers aren't good, or there's conflict. So not so much metrics, dollar signs, but cultural issues, drama, tension. That's when I'll meddle, and I'm doing my very best to assess that really without you even making me aware of it, through the ways that we can transparently monitor a business without being in it, which, in this day and age is a lot easier to do versus, to be a multi unit owner and not be in the business is a lot easier to do now than it's ever been. And coming up with those ways of inspecting what you inspect remotely, that alone is its own science. And I don't want to do it secretively. I want them to know, hey, I'm aware of this. I have access to this. I look at this, and they need to know that.
Mm, yeah, and you mentioned earlier at the beginning of our conversation that you watch a lot of stuff on YouTube and, you're big into learning.
Love YouTube.
Yeah, what's, like, your favorite thing that you're, like, listening to or watching or an area that you're focusing on kinda growing, your leadership and your skill sets?
Yeah, I just started recently the Opportunity Coach podcast. I call myself the Opportunity Coach, and it really just speaks to I love finding opportunity and helping people find opportunity in their own lives. And I think the way my mind works is problems are not ever looked at as problems, they're opportunities. And so this whole podcast is making people aware of that mindset unlocks really just new experiences and new levels of success, and that is probably the first thing you have to address before good things start happening to you. I love, like, just one of my first interviews, it's, I'm not looking for opportunity has found me, but it's because of the energy that I put out there. Was one of my guests' response as far as how do you find opportunity, and she's like, really, it always finds me, and I put myself in the rooms that's going to happen, and I can certainly attest to that. I want to be in a room where somebody has done something that I've about to do. It's silly for me to do something and not ask questions of somebody who's already done it if I have that opportunity to do it, because my mind's just not going to think about everything, right? So being that sponge. Um, but by having this podcast, I love now looking at business podcasts. So whether it's like the Diary of the CEO, that podcast, and listening to those interviews. Um, and um, I, I feel like it's not like I don't really actually go to the same kind of user over and over again. I'm kind of just based on the topic I'm searching, kind of finding that content. And one of the things that I'm just really focused on is just like the power of time and how it really is our most valuable asset. And I love the challenge of every day maximizing that time efficiently, and not just my own time, but also identifying where my team isn't using it effectively. Sorry. Um, so, as I kind of now formalize a true curriculum, where say you join my team and you're going to learn time management the way I think is effective, what I've learned to be effective. I get as many different kind of tidbits through just all these different YouTube videos or books. I loved listening to Jim Collins speak at the multi-unit franchise conference just recently. I actually wasn't aware of his, kind of whole just anything about him too much, and his original big book, Good to Great, he spoke on, and listening to it because I got the audio book, and how he kind of had case studies of just really successful CEOs and what made them very successful, versus the ones that were not, was made a lot of sense, but really was validating. And that was, like, I think written 30 years ago. And it is amazing, right? When you listen to or just read up on content, not the power of what works hasn't changed too much, right? I think, frankly, we're getting distracted about what works more and more, and I think we're always maybe trying to innovate and add and make
Overcomplicate.
yeah make things more complicated. Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. What was your biggest takeaway from either listening to him or diving into his book?
The best people actually aren't supposed to be managed, right? They're just meant to be guided, led, taught, which was really struck a nerve with me. I want to get to a level, which I already am with the key players on my team, where it's what is the problem? You tell me. Okay, I agree with you. That's the problem. How are we solving it? Okay, I think that could be a good starting point, but here's where my suggestions are, whatnot. Okay, go solve it. And as you're solving it, let me know how you need my help. Versus me identifying the problem, giving them the way that they solve it, holding their hand along the way. That's how you free yourself of not having to actually manage your own business. And you're that foundation, you're that sense of stability that your team needs to lean on when they need support, but you're not doing their job for them. which I think a lot of people end up just doing the job of the people they supervise, which is that's not the intent of the whole system.
Yeah, that actually brings up have you heard of or seen any of Dan Martell's videos? He wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time.
No. What is it? What's the book called?
The book's called Buy Back Your Time, but he has a really great YouTube channel too, Dan Martell,
Okay.
and, I'm listening to it for the second time, so, and actually a few of the folks on our leadership team are listening to it too. It's really, really good. Um but he talks about a principle called the 131, which is it's funny because you're saying what the 131 is, which is basically he's like, "Okay, if I hire you," he tells a story about how that his head of HR was like, "We got to hire 12 people in this period of time." I how do I do that? I don't know how to do it. He's like, "I hired you to tell me how to do it, not."
Yeah. Oh my god. I love that. Yep, yep, yep.
And so he goes, "Okay, you need to have." Well, did you 131 it, which is once identify one specific problem, come back with 3 potential solutions, and then give me your one specific recommendation. And then he would like provide feedback from that. And that's basically essentially what you just said as well. And it's so easy to just come up with answers for people.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if driving you is solving the problems, that's fine. But just know there's a limitation to then how you're operating because you can only solve so many problems at once, or there's now a delay because you have to be a part of the solution and you can't be a part of all these conversations at the same time. And so that's what I look at it as like, oh, it's okay, there's the inefficiency there. So if I empower my team to be this way and think like me and train them, then I don't have to be a part of every conversation and it frees up more time for me. And that's what I want. That's what drives me.
Cool, Nicholas. Thanks so much for coming on, man. It's really been awesome. Congratulations on all your success and just what you've done and built. I can tell that it's been, very intentional. I know it's probably taken a tremendous amount of hard work, and I can tell that like a lot of your success is your mindset is very obvious to me, which is a solution based mindset, and so I can see that that's been a huge part of your success, so congrats, man. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and people ask me like what makes a great franchisee because I support franchisees and the word optimist always just comes to mind, right? My best franchisees that I either directly support or know through the brands that I'm owning, we're all optimistic people, right? So, and that's what drives innovation and solutions. I'm really not the guy to call to bitch and moan and complain about something because it's almost toxic to me. And I actually talk about that on my most recent podcast episode. Is identifying your brain's default settings and then how to change them. But you got to first identify them. So that's the Opportunity Coach podcast, and just mentioning too this new business I just started. If business owners are looking for support of their financials, free cash flow is really the metric most business owners don't know. They identify it when they're preparing to sell versus monitoring it on like a monthly basis while they own their business. So my new company is called Free Cash Flow Advisors, and that has been really fun because I one thing to talk to a business owner and coach them without their P&L, but if I have the P&L, it's very very fun. And so I'm a finance guy. I'm kind of that CFO type mind as well as that operator. So it's been amazing to be able to like kind of just light bulb went off. It's time. Let's open the door here to this new company, and it's been going well.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Yeah, I think you and I are wired very similarly then, because I love the number side of it too. Well, awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and yeah, best of luck.
Thank you so much. Great to meet you in person or virtually, I should say.
Likewise. Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.